Thanks to Fast Forward, thanks to Vintage Photo Festival. And before I start my paper, I would like to maybe to give some note that as you noticed, I'm a second representative, a researcher from Latvia, and it's kind of not coincidence, but yeah, I will explain. I also will, my paper covers turbulent 1990s. So, and it's just like, yeah, I'm like, at least in Latvia, I think it's something on the air. So it is kind of enough distance to look back to the Soviet history, to 1990s, and just like I will give a hint, there will be also mentioned Ināra in my paper too. So the early 1990s marked a profound cultural awakening in Latvia. As the nation emerged from 5 decades of Soviet control, artists and curators confronted urgent task of rebuilding institutions, rewriting narratives, and redefining national identity through art. Exhibitions of visual art, particularly photography, become vital instrument for articulating Latvia's renewed independence and introducing its contemporary culture to international audience. The decade was characterized by unprecedented intensity of global engagement, as Latvian artists actively participated in cross-border exhibitions and cultural exchanges. This transformative moment fostered a new curatorial consciousness, experimental, independent, and deeply invested in questions of identity, gender, and representation. My paper examined the representation of Latvian photography in the USA during the 1990s, with particular attention to the curatorial and artistic work of Rūta Ināra Sniķeris, a Latvian American photographer, painter, and gallerist active in Boston. By situating Sniķeris' initiative, her photo studio One, the gallery, within the broader networks of post-Soviet cultural transformation, this study explores how Latvian photographers, especially women, were exhibited, interpreted, and contextualized in the American art scene during the decade following the collapse of the Soviet Union. The discussion also highlights the curatorial framework that emerged in Latvia itself at this time, emphasizing the contributions of curators and art historians Helena Demakova and Inga Steimane, whose pioneering work in the 1990s established the intellectual and institutional foundations for the country's renewed photographic culture. Oh, sorry. Within this context, Helena Demakova and Inga Steimane played decisive roles in shaping the visual and intellectual language of post-Soviet Latvian art, developing strategies that resonated far beyond the Baltic region. Their efforts form an essential backdrop for understanding how Sniķeris' curatorial work abroad evolved in dialogue with development at home. In the early 1990s, Helena Demakova expanded the research, expanded the reach of Latvian art through ambitious multimedia exhibitions and strategic engagement with global art platforms. Throughout the decades, she curated landmark shows that positioned Latvian artists within European contemporary discourse, challenging the exoticizing gaze often applied to post-Soviet cultures. Her curatorial work culminated in her role as the first curator of Latvia's national representation at the Venice Biennale in 1999. Presenting Intas Rukas photographic series, My Country People. These intimate portraits of rural Latvians foregrounded the ethics of observation, identity, and belonging, bringing Latvian photography to one of the most prestigious international stages. Notably, Rukas' work, while widely recognized abroad in the 1990s, received comparatively limited attention within Latvia, illustrating the uneven pathways of recognition faced by post-Soviet women photographers. Inga Steimane emerged as another vital figure in Latvia's new curatorial landscape, working with Riga's galleries such as M6, LN Gallery, and Gallery Bastais. She also contributed to Secret Experiment, Riga's first art gallery and club in the mid-1990s. There she helped establish an independent space where artists could exhibit and debate artistic practice outside state-controlled institutions. While Demakova and Steimane were redefining curatorial practice within Latvia and abroad, Rūta Ināra Sniķeris was developing a parallel initiative in the United States. Through her gallery, Photo Studio 1 in Boston, founded in early 1990s, Sniķeris provided an alternative platform for Latvian and Baltic photographers, many shaped by the Soviet experience to exhibit, collaborate, and gain visibility in the American art world. Her dual identity as artist and curator positioned her at the intersection of the creative production and cultural mediation, allowing her to challenge Western preconceptions about Baltic art, while fostering dialogue between Eastern European and American audiences. By tracing these interconnected histories, this paper examines how the curatorial innovations of post-Soviet Latvia found resonance across the Atlantic. Like Demakova and Steimane, Sniķeris adapted her practice to transnational context, developing experimental and dialogic models of representation for women in photography. Together, their initiatives demonstrate how Latvian curators and photographers contributed to reshaping the global narrative of the medium, transforming photography from a tool of documentation into a dynamic arena of cultural exchange, identity formation, and critical resistance to canonical hierarchies. Before turning to Rūta Ināra Sniķeris' work, it is essential to examine the curatorial strategies that shaped the international representation of Latvian photographers in USA during the 1980s and 1990s. a period marked by disintegration of the Soviet Union and the cultural reorientation of Eastern Europe. Two exhibitions were particularly instrumental in introduction Latvian photography to American audiences, Comrades and Cameras. These catalogs are presented here. Photographs from Latvia and other Soviet republics. The exhibition happened in Santa Barbara Museum of Modern Art in 1991, curated by American photographer and editor Glenn Serbin, and other exhibition, and the catalog is seen on the right, is a Stepping Out of Line, Contemporary Art Photography from Latvia, curated by American Latvian Boris Mangolds, a traveling exhibition that appeared at multiple venues across United States, and that happened in 1992. Both projects were early and ambitious attempts to challenge the monolithic perception of Soviet art that had dominated Western understanding during the Cold War. They revealed instead a plurality of voices, aesthetics, and political positions emerging from within the Baltic context. Latvian photographers, many of whom had already achieved recognition in the international competitions during the 1980s, were now reframed within the discourse of independence, resilience, and creative autonomy. The curatorial narratives of these shows emphasized both continuity and rupture, continuity with the modernist humanism and documentary precision that characterized Latvian photography since 1960s, and rupture in the way these images now articulated freedom, identity, and belonging. American reviews of these exhibitions reflected a fascination with the rediscovery of Baltic subjectivity, interpreting Latvian photographers' quiet observation and moral intensity as visual counterpoints to Soviet ideological imagery. Yet this framing also carried the bias of post-Cold War exoticization. Latvian photography was still often read through the lens of political transition rather than its own aesthetic evolution. As an important note as well, these two exhibitions also contributed to the institutional acquisition of Latvian photography in the United States. Works exhibited in these two exhibitions inform subsequent acquisition initiatives, notably at the Santa Barbara Museum of Modern Art and the Nancy and Norton Dodge collection of nonconformist art at Zimrelli Art Museum, Rutgers University, New Jersey, ensuring a lasting presence of Latvian photographic practice within major American art collections. By tracing these exhibitions, the paper identifies a crucial prelude to the diasporic curatorial initiatives of the mid-1990s, particularly the founding of Photo Studio One in Boston by Latvian American artist and curator Rūta Ināra Sniķeris. Established in Boston's Fort Point Channel Artist District in 1992, Photo Studio One becomes the first commercial gallery in the United States dedicated specially to Latvian and more broadly Baltic photography. Motivated by her, Rūta's conversations with Vilnis Auziņš, the head of the Latvian Museum of Photography, and her own identity as a Latvian American artist, Sniķeris founded the space as a response to what she described as a, I'm quote, lack of dissemination of Baltic photography in the North America. Over 6 years, Photo Studio organized nearly 30 exhibitions that showcased photographers from Latvia and its diaspora, ranging from documentary traditions to experimental montage and conceptual practices. Among the most significant were exhibitions featuring women photographers Māra Brašmane, Inte Rūta, and Ināra, artists whose works redefined intimacy, social observation, and gender representation. Māra Brašmane is one of Latvia's most prominent documentary photographers, celebrated for her empathic portrayals of everyday life in Riga since 1960s. Her practice bridges humanist realism and subtle social observation, capturing moments of quiet endurance and emotional depth within ordinary settings. At Photo Studio, her exhibition, Abundant Haste, happened in 1996, presented a series of photographic still lifes of urban spaces that reflected on the material and psychological traces of everyday life, transforming still life motifs into mediations on memory and temporality. Inte Rūta is internationally recognized for her black and white portrait series depicting rural or urban Latvians. Her compassionate approach to portraiture using natural light, long exposures, and extensive dialogue with her subjects culminated in the celebrated series My Country People. Rūta's solo show at Photo Studio 1 in 1997 strengthens this transatlantic dialogue around her work, positioning Latvian photography within global debates on identity, belonging, and the ethics of representation. And Ināra, belonging to a generation of women photographers who emerged during late Soviet and early post-Soviet period, exploring themes of body, intimacy, and the performative self. Her works featured the were exhibited at the exhibitions The Female Nude in 1995 and another exhibition Art Body in 1997 at Photo Studio 1, expanded the discourse of the female gaze and questioned the objectification of women in photography. Through these exhibitions, Sniķeris not only introduced Latvian photographers to United States art scene, but also created diasporic curatorial language, one that negotiated between cultural representation, market realities, and aesthetic independence. Her gallery's modest location and self-financed model reflected the precarious yet visionary nature of women-led initiatives in both Latvia and diaspora during 1990s. About methodology, how I work, just like wanted to comment, of course, like I use archival research, a lot of helps periodicals, like which is published, and in particular about Rūtas Ināras Sniķeris work, diaspora press was published, but maybe not so much in Latvia. And also, like, I approach intergenerational dialogue. So it seeks. So I'm trying to to have a contact, direct, and trying to build relations with photographers, or at this time photographer and curator and gallerist, Rūta, Ināra, Sniķeris. So this way of intergenerational dialogue seeks to trace how curatorial and artistic practices across both Latvia and its diaspora form overlapping networks of meaning. This intergenerational dimension is not merely a methodological tool, it is also a political choice to foreground silenced voices, to create a dialogic archive where memory is shared, contested, and revalued. Here I draw inspiration from Kelly Jones' 2011 essay collection, I-Minded. Jones insists on the necessity of reopening conversations once thought closed, linking past struggles to contemporary movements such as Black Lives Matter and Say Her Name. Following her lead, I treat the act of revisiting women's photography and curatorial practices of the 1990s, not as an exercise in nostalgia, but as a means of addressing unresolved questions of cultural memory, gender, and agency in the post-socialist present. And taken together, the initiatives of Helena Demakova, Inga Steinmane, and Rūta, Ināra, Sniķeris reveal a shared pattern of female curatorial agency that shaped the representation of Latvian photography at a pivotal historical moment. While Demakova and Steinmane cultivated intellectual and institutional frameworks in newly independent Latvia, Sniķeris extended that vision across the Atlantic, forging a transnational infrastructure for Latvian photographic visibility. And their combined efforts reframed photography not merely as an artistic medium, but as a site of cultural negotiation, a language through which questions of belonging, gender, and national identity were actively redefined. By foregrounding the contributions of women curators and photographers, this paper argues that Latvian photography of the 1990s emerged as both an act of local cultural resilience and a form of global dialogue, transforming the post-Soviet periphery into a vital space of curatorial experimentation, memory work, and critical exchange. Thank you.